On this episode of Law Weekly, we focus yet again on the extent of the Senate's powers, especially on confirmation of nominees and whether they can tinker with figures proposed in the budget. We discuss these issues and more with a professor of law, Taiwo Osipitan. We also have the views of the Attorney General of Osun State on the much talked about issue of restructuring, plus a recap of the top trending stories from the courts. That's the lineup on this episode of Law Weekly. Hello and welcome. I am Shola Shoyeli. There's been so much reactions trailing the acting president's statement that the Senate's confirmation was not required for the EFCC's Ibrahim Magu to continue in office, so much so that the presidency is said to be considering approaching the Supreme Court for a verdict that will lay the issue to rest. But what is the correct interpretation of Section 171, which the acting president cited on the statement? I have the views of a professor of law on the issue.
Well, in interpreting Section 171, you must interpret it along with Section 3, subsection 2 of the EFCC Act in terms of the requirements of approval of Senate to appoint the chairman of EFCC. But when you look at the Constitution, Section 171 talks about mentions permanent secretary and some officers that do not require Senate approval. But if you look at it carefully, you discover that under that section, heads of extra ministerial department and agency can be appointed by the president and removed by the president at his pleasure. He does not require approval. So my take on it is that the acting chairman of EFCC does not report to any ministry or any minister. That makes his unit an extra ministerial department in the sense that it's not accountable to any ministry but to the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. That being so, the President does not require the approval of the Senate to appoint the head of EFCC that I see as an extra ministerial department. Granted that the EFCC Act requires that you must get Senate approval, that provision is evidently inconsistent with Section 171 of the Constitution. And the Constitution remains the ground norm, which is called the organic law, the mother of all laws in Nigeria. So that if there be any law, like the EFCC Act, that is inconsistent with the Constitution, then the EFCC Act provision must give way to the Constitution to the extent of its inconsistency by virtue of Section 1, subsection 3 of the Constitution that says that this Constitution shall be supreme and shall have binding force on all persons and authorities. If there be any law which is inconsistent with this Constitution, that law shall be null and void to the extent of its inconsistency with the Constitution. So, no approval of Senate is required. And granted that they had gone there twice, it was a mistake to have gone there in the first instance. But then it's a constitutional right that the president has, and he cannot waive it. It's not waivable.
With this interpretation that you've given, does it then mean that the acting chairman of EFCC can stay in an acting capacity for as long as the lifespan of this administration?
Not only can he stay in acting capacity, he can also be elevated to a substantive chairman with a letter from the president or acting president without necessarily seeking any approval again of the Senate. But my worry is that there are moves to go to Supreme Court to go and test the law. I do not think that is necessary. Let him be appointed, and whoever is not pleased should go and challenge it. But I do not think that Supreme Court has original jurisdiction to decide issues affecting disputes between one arm of government, lawmaking arm of government, and executive arm of government. I do not think it has capacity or jurisdiction to determine such dispute. I do not think so. Bearing in mind that Supreme Court exists and exercises original jurisdiction in matters or dispute involving the federation and the state and between the states. But if there's a dispute between two arms of government or matters affecting one agency of government, I believe that it is the Federal High Court that has jurisdiction to entertain it. Although it might get to the Supreme Court eventually, but that will be in its appellate as opposed to its original jurisdiction.
Still talking about the extent of the Senate's powers, another senator has reportedly challenged the presidency to also consider seeking interpretation on whether the National Assembly can alter figures proposed in the budget submitted by the executive. Do you think that the National Assembly can alter figures?
I believe that once those documents, if those figures are there, I do not think it's in the power, or within the power of the Senate to start altering figures and juggling around, because it is a budget presented. If they have issues with those budget, with the figures, they should sit down and sort it out administratively, not altering the budget as presented by the executive.
Prof, there's recently been agitations for a review of the salaries and emoluments of certain public officers who are said to be earning multiple benefits as a result of some of the offices they've held in the past and the offices that they currently hold. Do you agree that this category of people need to decide which benefits they want to earn, especially for a country that's looking at saving money to do so many other things?
Well, I believe that that agitation has its own history, in the sense that this is not the first time we are having a president with multiple benefits. Right from 1999 Constitution, when we began with General Ambassador, he too earned multiple benefits. I believe that the agitation is not unconnected with the fact that you have some people earning multiple benefits and civil servants and public officers are being owed salaries for months, whereas somebody is earning double salary and emoluments. That's really, but if we are able to pay the civil servants and public officers their entitlement as and when due, I believe the agitation will go down. But having said that, we're looking at law and morality. Law is one thing, morality is another thing. In law, you could be right,